As I think about that, I'm like, I wonder if she probably wondered if God wasn't in this. Because she tells her, she goes, don't you worry, sweetheart. You won't have to wait long. This will be resolved today. It'll be resolved this morning. You won't have to wait very long. He wants you. But notice, go ahead. It's clear Boaz's desires are in. I already mentioned that. Go ahead. Yet he leaves it in God's hands. He goes, but there's someone closer than me. Boaz does not go get this guy aside and probably go, okay, how much do you need to? I really want Ruth, so what do we need to do here? And this is what I missed. And this is what Autumn and Mrs. Munson and obviously Dave got and I missed. I was looking at it through 2023. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. Boaz is waiting for this guy to come along. And he comes along and he says, hey, this needs to be redeemed. The guy goes, I'll redeem it. Cool. Understand part of your duty then would be to have children with Ruth. He says, I can't. 2023, I'm like, who cares? Did you listen to the parable that Jesus was told? Remember the story? Did you see the order there? It wasn't up to whether you wanted to marry Ruth. It was the next person in line. It was his job to marry her. Do you understand what I'm saying? I miss that. I live in a different culture than they do. It was that man's duty. So think about this. Boaz has the pearl of great price. He really wants Ruth. He's really excited about this. He's a good guy, and we're all rooting for him. Everybody in this room is rooting for him to get the girl. But he's godly and goes, but someone's closer than me. And where does he meet the man? Right in front of the elders. So that it's all nice and legal. And I don't think he's being ungodly. He's like, and also if you're going to sign on this commitment, you got to have kids with Ruth. I used to think the guy was like, a friend of Boaz, like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I don't think so. Mrs. Munson brought up to me, she goes, this is what Autumn brought to me. She goes, we're not giving his name. We're not giving the guy's name. She said, and you said the names mean something. Well, Autumn pointed out to me, because David brought it out to her, that one of the things that happens if you turn this down is your name will be erased in Israel. You won't have a name anymore. Think about the godliness of Boaz to do things God's way here. All is fair in love and war. What do you think Abraham felt like after waiting for a son all those years? And think about how much his wife loves Isaac. And suddenly God comes to you one morning for devotion time. And you're like, can't wait for my devos with God. And God's like, hey, you know that kid I gave you? Yeah, I want you to take him up to Mount Moriah and I want you to sacrifice him. I'm surprised Abraham didn't go, excuse me, I have a few questions. Lord, that dog doesn't hunt. Have you talked to the missus lately, Lord? Did you run this by the wife? I don't think she's going to let me take her precious boy. What'd you do with the boy today? I killed him. That's not going to fly. And Abraham just does it. Are you willing to put what's most precious to you on the altar? How bad do you think Boaz wanted Ruth? I'd say pretty bad. I think pretty bad. And yet, he puts Ruth on the altar. You know what he tells Ruth? If he wants to do this, well, good. Because it was that man's duty to do that. You see what I'm saying? It was his job to do that. We're excited about it because we want Boaz to get it. And he does get the girl. A little spoiler there. He does get the girl, and it's a happy ending. But not so much for the man that turned down his duty. It was his job to do that. It was a big deal. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I returned and saw in the sun, the race is not always in swift, nor the battle is strong, neither bread for the wise, nor riches of men of understanding, nor yet favor of men of skill. Time and chance happen at them all. A coach that's been coaching as long as I've been alive came up to me one day. Really like him. He's a great guy. And he said to me, do you know what I think? I said, what do you think? He goes, it doesn't matter if you're good, it only matters if you're lucky. He said, well, that's horrible advice. Do you know what he means? You're amazing, everybody else is amazing too, so it doesn't matter. You don't get to win anything, you don't get the big championship. And 5 years later, everybody's terrible. And you're like, why couldn't I have been Because the race isn't always to the fastest person, but all the strong. Maybe you get the flu, maybe you break your leg, maybe that year somebody's a little faster than you and they get it. Maybe that day you trip out of the blocks and that's that. You lose. Sorry. And that's why we humans grasp so hard. You all do it, I do it. We're tempted to try to get our own way by grasping. Oh, I gotta have Ruth. I gotta have Ruth. I'm gonna do whatever I have to keep Ruth. How? How are you gonna do that if that's not the other guy's spiritual duty together? You can't take her. But God allows it to happen anyway. He put Ruth on the altar and God gave Ruth back. Man, that's godly, isn't it? He put what he loved most on the altar. Some people are like, no, I can't even say that. Go ahead. Here's what, believer, if you know God, what do we know? And we know all things work together for good, none that love God, and they're called according to His purpose. So worldly guy, or worldly woman's like, let me tell you everything I built in my life. You know what the spiritual guy says? The spiritual woman says? Let me tell you what God's done in my life. All the opportunities He's given me. I am so blessed. Different perspective. Different perspective. Different perspective. Ruth was the pearl of great price. You are, I believe, something intensely valuable because someone paid everything he had for you. And that person was the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he paid everything he had for you. For you. Are you the kind of person that takes that for granted? Think about this. Are you the woman that's like, I don't care how I look, I don't care if my husband thinks I'm pretty or not, I'm going to do what I want to do, whatever? Are you the kind of person who, wow, you're beautiful. You're just beautiful. And I said, well, Pastor, I don't feel very beautiful. Well, don't you feel that way sometimes in your spiritual life too? You don't feel very valuable. You don't feel very, you know what? If you're obeying the Lord, aren't you valuable then? Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Even if you don't feel like you're valuable. How many times did someone compliment you when you felt, not even talking about wife and husband, you were about to give up on something? It's like, I'm done. If somebody gave you one compliment, that's all you needed. That's all you needed to keep going. Like, man, I really appreciate you doing that. You're like, man, I think I'll do that for a little longer. You know? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that nuts? Well, a little bit of encouragement goes a long way. All right. Father, story of Ruth. Really, I think a story of us and you in some ways. Father, Lord, the interesting thing I've discovered is what I want most in this world changes sometimes from decade to decade. What was important to me last decade may not be as important to me in this season of life. I want something different. And it seems like you have to tell me to go to Mount Moriah to put what I want on the altar. And sometimes I tell you, no, I'm not going to Mount Moriah. Are you kidding me? How am I going to explain that to everybody else? Father, I just pray that you would mold us into your image and you'd be with us, Lord. Help us to be what you want us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. So, Sam, go.